stared at the tray in front of me. A flimsy paper cup filled with water sat alone on the scratched plastic surface. That was all. No sandwich, no soup, no apple, just water. My stomach twisted painfully, and yet the louder ache wasn't hunger, it was shame. Around me, the cafeteria thundered with laughter, chatter, the scraping of forks against trays stacked with hot pizza, golden fries, steaming pasta. I tried to disappear into the background, to shrink small enough that no one would notice. What I didn't know was that someone had already noticed, and her unseen hand was about to change everything. I hadn't always been the kid with nothing to eat. Home used to be warm, filled with the smell of bread and spices from my mother's cooking. Dinner was a place for stories, for laughter, for life. But when my father lost his job, everything fell silent. Bills piled up, cupboards emptied, and the joy of meals turned into the silence of skipped dinners. By the time I walked into the school cafeteria with no money, I thought I could handle it. I convinced myself that hunger was easier to hide than humiliation. Sit down, sip water, pretend I wasn't starving. That was my plan. But when the smell of melted cheese and roasted chicken drifted past me, the act of pretending cracked like glass. And when my own stomach growled loudly enough for others to hear, I knew the mask wouldn't hold forever. It happened sooner than I thought. One afternoon, as I sat with my usual water, a boy across the table frowned. "Is that all you're eating?" he asked, his tone sharp, his eyes narrowing. My throat tightened. I forced a shrug and muttered, "Not hungry." But his lips curled into a smirk, and he leaned over to whisper something to the boy beside him. Within seconds, laughter spread like wildfire, bouncing from one mouth to another until the table was shaking with giggles. Sound stabbed deeper than hunger ever could. I felt myself sink lower, staring at my water, cheeks burning, appetite gone. That day I didn't even sip the cup. I walked out before the tears could fall. I thought I was invisible, but I was wrong. Someone had seen. Someone who mattered. She was always there, the cafeteria worker. Hair tied back in a simple bun, apron stained with sauces from feeding hundreds of students. Her job was routine, unnoticed by most, but she noticed me. Day after day, she watched as I passed the line, took nothing but water, and sat quietly in the corner. Students around me whispered cruel words, or worse, they said nothing. A silence of indifference can cut sharper than insults. One day, I overheard two girls say, "Why does he even come here? It's embarrassing." Their words landed like stones. I clenched my jaw and walked on. Nobody spoke up. Nobody defended me. Kindness nugget number 1. Studies show that even one act of empathy, like a friend speaking against mockery, can reduce bullying by half. Silence, however, lets cruelty grow unchecked. But in that silence, something else was stirring. It was a rainy Thursday, the kind of day when umbrellas drip puddles at the cafeteria door and gray skies press heavy on the windows. I carried my water cup as usual, hands trembling not only from hunger, but from the humiliation I wore like a second skin. I set the cup down, head low, when suddenly I noticed steam rising from my tray. Confused, I blinked hard. There next to my water sat a bowl of hot soup. Beside it, a slice of bread, even an apple. My heart lurched in disbelief. I hadn't moved. I hadn't asked. How had it gotten there? I turned, and my eyes found her, the cafeteria worker, walking back to the counter. She didn't glance at me, didn't expect thanks, didn't announce her gesture. She just slipped the meal onto my tray in silence. That simple act cracked something inside me, something tender I thought had died. I didn't know it then, but years earlier, when she herself had been a hungry child, a stranger had done the same for her. A forgotten promise had lived on in her heart. And now, I was the next link in that chain of kindness. From that day on, my tray never looked empty again. Sometimes it was soup, sometimes pasta, sometimes just an extra piece of fruit, but always something hot, something human, something dignifying. My shame began to dissolve. Bite by bite, I felt pieces of myself returning. But it wasn't only about the food. It was about survival. Hunger had stolen my focus in class, drained my hope, and made me feel less than human. With a meal before me, I could dream again. I could belong again. Kindness nugget number 2. Science shows hunger reduces focus by up to 60%. But even a small, nutritious meal can restore not only clarity but also hope. She wasn't just feeding my stomach. She was quietly saving my future, and here's something I want you to do. Screenshot this truth and share it with someone who needs hope today. Sometimes the smallest meal can feed the biggest hope. Let it remind the world that tiny acts matter. Soon, her hidden kindness didn't stay hidden. Other students noticed the meals on my tray. A girl who once giggled now slid half her sandwich across the table. A teacher left a wrapped muffin on my desk one morning. Another cafeteria worker handed me an extra milk carton with a playful wink. Kindness snowballed. One act became 2, 2 became 10, and soon the whole cafeteria felt different. The same place that once echoed with whispers and laughter at my expense now hummed with something gentler, something better. Notes appeared on the cafeteria bulletin board. Thank you for feeding us. We see your quiet work. You matter more than you know. The cafeteria itself had transformed from a stage of humiliation to a classroom of compassion. What began with one worker's silent sacrifice had rippled into a community awakening. The breakthrough moment came one afternoon when I finally found the courage to speak. I carried my tray to her counter, heart pounding, and whispered, "Thank you. I don't know how to repay you." She looked at me with tired but kind eyes and said softly, "Just promise me, when you see someone hungry, you won't look away." Her words branded themselves into my soul. Gratitude filled me, but so did responsibility. Kindness nugget number 3. Psychologists have proven gratitude doesn't just make us feel good. It strengthens relationships, builds resilience, and helps us heal faster from hardship. She wasn't only feeding me. She was teaching me a truth that would shape my life. Years later, I received my first steady paycheck. I remembered her words. I walked into a local soup kitchen, not as the one with the empty tray, but as the one filling trays for others. And in every bowl of soup I served, I saw her. I saw her quiet hands. Her ripple had reached me and through me. It would reach countless others. That's the lesson I carry still. Dignity doesn't come from what we receive. It grows when we choose to give. But this story doesn't end there. Months later, long after I had graduated, a letter arrived at my doorstep. No return name, no signature. Inside were only 3 words, handwritten on a folded scrap of paper. I saw you. My chest tightened as I read it again. She had been there watching, not just in the cafeteria, but in my life, reminding me that kindness never disappears. It lingers, it waits, it ripples, and one day it returns. And as I close this story, I'll leave you with this. Next week, you'll hear about the forgotten child whose song silenced an entire city. Tuned.